All right, we're gonna get started. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Fantastic. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Climate Solutions in Action event, which is the fourth and last in a four-part series exploring various land-based solutions to climate change. My name is Bianca McGrath Martinez, and I am the program director of HECHO. So HECHO was founded in 2013 by a group of Hispanic elected officials and community leaders from across the Southwest who had concerns about the impact of oil and gas development on the public lands where they fished, hunted, camped, and hiked. And these concerns are completely warranted, as carbon dioxide emissions from oil and gas development on our public lands account for nearly a quarter of the total US carbon dioxide emissions, which have contributed to our global climate change crisis. Another impact of oil and gas and the burning of fossil fuels is pollution, to which Hispanics are disproportionately impacted by, with exposure to 63% more pollution than non-Hispanic whites. Hispanics are also among the racial ethnic groups who are underrepresented in the decision-making processes that impact our air, water, land, health, and communities. These are among the reasons that HECHO seeks to close the gap between underrepresentation when it comes to decision-making and overrepresentation when it comes to impact from environmental harms. At the core of how we can accomplish this is through HECHO's mission to empower Hispanic leaders to engage their communities in the conservation of our public lands. And even more, we believe that everyone should have equal access to the benefits of nature, and our public lands play a huge role in that. Today's topic will be on solar energy zones, or an SEZ. An SEZ is a zone taken from multi-use through the Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement process across 6 states in the American Southwest and designated for utility-scale solar development. There are several across those states and 3 in Colorado. Today's panel will give insight into the effort to bring SEZs to Colorado's San Luis Valley from the perspective of government, community, and industry. The panel will be hosted and moderated by HECHO's most recent hire, Andrea Trujillo Guajardo. Andrea came on as HECHO's policy director at the end of October. She is originally from Antonito, which is 6 miles north of the New Mexican border and part of the Los Conejos Mexican land grant located in the San Luis Valley. Being a part of this community, Andrea brings a unique passion and perspective to this event, and we are really grateful to have her lead this conversation. So while our event is focused on Colorado, we have people joining from many different places. We invite you to use the chat to let us know where you are joining us from. Additionally, our geographic focus today is on the San Luis Valley, which is the ancestral lands to over 12 sovereign nations, including Hopi, Ute, Jicarilla, Apache, Navajo, Comanche, Kiowa, Tiwa, Tewa, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Pueblo tribes. I'm now going to pass it over to Mike Kruger, who is the president and CEO of the Colorado Solar and Storage Association, or COSA. Mike is going to talk a little about COSA and then pass it over to Andrea, who will introduce our first speaker, Colorado State Representative Donald Valdez.
Thank you so much, Bianca. It is a real pleasure and honor to be here. As the president of the Colorado Solar and Storage Association, we are very aware that there's a massive energy transformation going on within Colorado and across the country as we move away from those polluting carbon dioxide polluting fossil fuels towards clean and renewable energy. It's exciting to hear about and to be involved with this climate solutions and actions effort around solar energy zones. At COSA, we are looking to try to figure out how do we ensure that the benefits of clean solar and storage are spread across the entire state and not concentrated in just a few select areas where we end up with a few winners within Colorado and then other counties and communities missing out on the benefits of not only reducing pollution in their own backyard, but also benefiting from 20 years or 25 years of lease payments and tax payments. So it's exciting to talk about these solar energy zones and the ability to identify communities that want to reap the benefits of the incredible natural resource that we have here in Colorado with all of our days of sun and our ability to produce electricity both locally and then ultimately I think what we're going to see is regionally for the rest of the country. So it is a real honor to be here and really appreciate the partnership with HECHO. Thank you so much for inviting us and for having some of our members on. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Andrea.
Thanks, Mike. Representative Donald Valdez is a 5th-generation San Luis Valley native and multi-generational rancher, tending to land he and his family cultivated in La Jara, Colorado. Conservation has always been important to Representative Valdez, who joined the United States Department of Agricultural, Natural Resources Conservation Service. He works closely with local farmers and ranchers, as well as community representatives and government partners, fine-tuning his skills in the conservation of water, soils, plants, and ecosystem management. Representative Valdez enjoys spending time at his family ranch, where he grows small grains, alfalfa, and helps to oversee a cow-calf operation.
Hi, hello, and good afternoon. Buenos días, ¿cómo están todos? It's great to be here, as today our discussion focuses on the San Luis Valley, home to many and home to not only my family, but it's a beautiful place in southern Colorado, south central Colorado that I call home, which is the largest alpine valley in the world, headquarters in the Rio Grande River Basin. The human occupancy and land tenure in the valley begins 12,000 years ago and has witnessed many land ethnics and people migrating to and through and including many diverse Native Americans, the Indo-Hispano, commonly referred to as Hispanics and Latinos, that were incentivized through Spanish and Mexican land grants to move to the region. Today, the region is largely Algarian and has stable population of diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multinational people. Our discussion centers this story as we focus on regional solutions to climate change and a landscaping planning process like problematic National Environment Policy Act. As a Valley native, energy is key. This morning it was 6 below, and I know we had to continue to keep our heater running to keep our house warm, but also the lights on. Energy is a key aspect in everybody's household. As we continue to look at more and efficient renewable resources to keep our energy and lights on, in the San Luis Valley, we're home for the best solar arrays in the world. Not only solar, but our natural resources and our water. Our water is one of the best water in the world and unlike anything else. Growing up in the San Luis Valley, I was blessed with many things, but especially more anything my parents. And with that, I cannot say that the traditions, the culture, the heritage of the people is what makes the San Luis Valley rich. As we continue to look at energy needs and possibilities of transmission and distribution in the San Luis Valley and getting that next mile, so we can continue to make sure that households and residential and commercial property have an efficient but also renewable resources and renewable energy moving forward. One of the great things about HECHO is Hispanics enjoying camping, but also our natural resources, getting outside, learning about educational needs, but survival needs too, and putting food on our table. And that's one of the major things that I love about HECHO, and moving forward from there, it's great to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donald. Next, we have Christine Canaly. Christine is the Executive Director for the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council. She joined them in June of 2000, where she mobilized key local and regional constituencies to support legislation for the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve Act of 2000, and received congressional recognition for her efforts. In coordination with EPA Region 8, she joined with San Luis Valley community leaders to prioritize environmental health protocols, which have since engaged over 4,000 households in educational forums for protecting their indoor air and water quality through mitigation and regular household maintenance. Chris also developed a solar transmission working group in 2009 that had a direct impact on renewable energy awareness and continues in pursuit of a strategy for distributed solar generation. She has participated with core teams to develop other San Luis Valley conservation organizations, including Citizens for San Luis Valley Water, EPA Superfund Technical Community Assistance, Summitville Gold Mine Oversight and Cleanup, and the Rio Grande Headwaters Land Trust. Before moving to the San Luis Valley in 1988, Chris worked as an engineer with CNN Headlines in Atlanta, Georgia, and NBC News in New York City.
Well, thank you, Andrea. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So thank you very much. And I just want to thank HECHO for all the organizing they did to make this happen, because it's a lot to pull together. I wanted to just give an overview of, from a community perspective, what we ended up getting involved with and why we kind of got pulled into this. And just very briefly, and Andrea has said this, and we talked about this already, but, you know, this work is cyclical. And I'm just so happy to see, you know, because, you know, in 2008, under the first Obama administration, we had Reinvestment Act funds. And that really drove a lot of the renewable energy efforts. And then, of course, things subsided, but it was enough to really get things moving. But actually, our story starts a little bit before that, which I'm going to get into. But in Colorado right now, and I just was looking at some graphs, and I just, you know, of course, you'd get kind of curious. And I apologize, the sun is kind of reflecting right now. So anyway, but just to give you an idea, in 2013, when you look at the graph here, you know, you can see, and unfortunately, the XY axis kind of changed on these two graphs a little bit. And what this is it's comparing trillions of BTUs that Colorado needs every year. And what you see from 2013 to 2018 is that there has been an increase in renewable energy development and a slight decrease in fossil fuel dependence. So that's good news. Clearly it's not where we need to be, but it just shows the effort that's necessary in order for us to, really, basically have an impact on an incredibly sophisticated infrastructure. And we're moving in the right direction, though clearly we have to get a lot faster. And the reason that this happened, and I didn't mean to put a lot of words on here, but just to show that energy producers respond to policy. And Tri-State, which oversees our cooperatives, our rural electric cooperatives in 44, and there's 44 different rural cooperatives. Well, now I think there's 43, but anyway, Tri-State oversees all these rural cooperatives and throughout the Midwest and Southwest. And they're the second largest producer of electricity, along with Excel, who also is part of the national grid. And because of policy that's been passed, because of communities pushing, Tri-State is now in a very different place than it was when I started getting involved in the early 2000s. And, we still are dealing with they're getting 23% of their electricity from coal plants, but that's a far cry from where it was 20 years ago. So we're moving in the right direction. And the reason that this has happened is because of legislation that's been passed through our state legislature and community efforts to make that happen. And Excel's energy plan, which Governor Hickenlooper in 2017 basically wrote an executive order, and now they're committed to reducing greenhouse gases. So you can see how, this is an evolution over time that we need to stay participating with, and it's an opportunity for us to really make a difference, because all of these efforts rely on public process. And that's where we really can have huge impact. And I just wanted to also show that in 2008, again, after the Obama administration had taken office, there was an effort to do a solar energy programmatic environmental impact statement in 6 states in the Southwest. And you can see on this map where all these areas were chosen to do and develop solar energy zones.
Christine,
And so, yeah.
thank you. Let me interject quickly. Would you mind hitting F5 for your slideshow to start so we can see it better? The attendees could see the slideshow, or start slideshow.
Let's see. Let me see here.
Christine, if you go over to slideshow on that orange panel.
Oh, yes, thank
Yes,
you.
and then you
Thank
can
you,
go from current slide.
From current slide. Thank you. Sorry about that,
Thank
everybody.
you.
My apologies. Anyway, so you see these areas that have been highlighted in 6 states. And so we're up here in Colorado, and we had 4 areas that were selected on the upper right-hand side within the San Luis Valley. And so, of course, we were very involved. We got citizens involved to respond to this public process. And we obviously had concerns because there were fairly large areas that were carved out on BLM lands. And Joe's going to talk more about that. But it was a public process, and these public processes take years, but they're really worthwhile. And so we were able to participate. And honestly, Colorado was not considered a big player in terms of the landscape and where the load levels were, and it compared to other states like Nevada and Arizona, for example, New Mexico. But we have been a very important player in terms of providing leadership to not just the entire country, but for clearly in the Southwest. And that started in 2005 when we were actually the first state in the country to pass a ballot initiative, which was driven by the communities here in Colorado. And there were 17 states that were involved in passing some sort of renewable energy standard through their state legislatures. That did not happen for us. So we went ahead and passed a ballot initiative to get a renewable energy standard moving in this state. And of course, once that happened, you know, we started moving. So this is just to show how long it takes to change an infrastructure like electricity in this country. It takes a while, it takes a lot of commitment, but it's definitely worthwhile, and we're moving in the right direction. And what we did, and what Andrea really wanted me to focus on, is the solar energy working group that was established here in the Valley. And the reason that this map is so interesting, and it's available on our website, by the way, which I will show in the next slide. But what we did was we got together, and these were all volunteers, by the way, but we got together and we said, okay, what would we like to see on a map? Because of course with GIS now you can layer. And so what we did was we identified where all the sensitive resources were in the San Luis Valley. We identified where all the public lands were. And then we put the electrical grid on top of that, along with our Senate pivot irrigation systems. And these are, you know, clearly these are complex systems, one layered on top of each other, but we wanted to see how electricity and water came together. And then if you see all these circles on this map, what these are all the center pivot irrigation systems that rely on electricity and water within the San Luis Valley. And then they've been color coded because some of them have surface rights and some of them don't have surface rights. And I don't mean to get into water policy wonk here, but this is really important, especially for the Valley right now, because we wanted to see where the center pivots were that basically had, you know, the potential of going out of production because they didn't have any surface rights as an augmentation plan. So, you know, we layered all this stuff on top of each other, and what you begin to end up seeing is a really interesting picture of how we can start looking at land use and how we can start changing land use. And what other potentials are, like 33 substations that are around the Valley. Half are owned by the co-op, the other half are owned by Excel. And look at potential distributed solar hook-ins at all these different distribution areas, and see where we have a potential to develop solar, distributed solar throughout the entire Valley. And we had an amazing group of people, honestly, probably about 20, 25 people stayed involved 4 years to develop this map and to come up with recommendations, which honestly is kind of unusual. But when we did anything that had to do with solar and solar development in the Valley and the potential of, you know, people being able to contribute to the grid, there were hundreds and hundreds of people involved in these meetings. And I'm talking about a place that's the size of the state of Connecticut that has less than 50,000 people living here. So clearly people were very interested in this issue. And I'm so glad that HECHO is bringing this to the fore and giving us the opportunity to talk about this again. And at that point, I think we did get some snow finally here, which we're very excited about. This was actually quite a while ago. This was in 2003, and this was in April, by the way, of 2003. And we're in different times now in terms of drought conditions. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact us through slvec.org. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Christine. Next, we have Sam Sowers from Community Energy Incorporated. Sam joined Community Energy in the summer of 2010 and brings his multifaceted skill set of over 30 years of experience in development, real estate, entitlement, government process, and engineering to the team. As Vice President of Development, Sam guides strategic and business development through a collaborative approach of offtake opportunity, real estate procurement, corporate partnering, utility and community coordination, and project entitlement management in the Midwest and West. Sam also directs project construction efforts for Community Energy's held assets. Sam developed the 156 megawatt Comanche solar project in Pueblo, Colorado, along with multiple other solar projects in the Midwest and West, including a 230 megawatt Utah portfolio currently under construction. The financial closing of these projects represents nearly $800 million in investments. In addition to the above, Sam manages a pipeline of over 2,000 megawatts of projects in the Midwest and West regions. Sam draws from his experience in the development and construction of over $500 million of commercial assets, as well as public and private infrastructure improvements to establish and build long-term relationships with corporate, institutional, and private parties. Prior to Community Energy, Sam was a development manager for Panettone Development Company, an international leader in commercial real estate, and the Rocky Mountain Division Manager for ENR, top 50 civil engineering firm, where he managed a staff of more than 40 engineers and technical staff, and established the firm as one of the top development consulting firms in Colorado. Sam holds a BS in civil engineering from Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia, and is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Colorado. Sam is also the president of a water and sanitation district here in Colorado. Thanks, Sam.
Wow, thanks, Andrea. I appreciate that very nice introduction. I may need to work on shortening my bio a little bit, and I will apologize a little bit if you hear some squeals in the background. I've got a new puppy, and he's a little anxious this morning, and so he may interject now and again. But thank you, HECHO, for inviting me to present and participate in this event. And I will share my screen here real quick. I've got a brief slideshow. Can everybody see that? What am I? I'm sure, did I share the right one?
You're good, Sam.
Okay, you can see my slideshow. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Community Energy, wanted to talk here a little bit about responsible development in the San Luis Valley, which we have a number of years of experience in. The Community Energy we started in 1999, so we have over 20 years of renewable energy experience, initially in what was called the volunteer market. We were one of the pioneers who initiated managing of renewable energy credits across the country. Excel does that through its wind choice program, and they now have a solar choice program that customers can also participate in. We're owned and managed by original founders, and of course we fund all of our activities directly. Just a quick overview of things that we've done, all of which I would extend apply a strong measure of social involvement and awareness and activities. This is our Jersey Atlantic Wind Farm in New Jersey. It's a part of our 700 megawatts of wind projects that we've done across the country since 1999. Our utility scale, Andrea mentioned our Comanche solar project in Pueblo. This is a part of our now 1,500 megawatts of projects that we put in place since 2009. Comanche was one of the first projects across the country, sorry, that was highly competitive with all source of development, and it competed against gas, against coal, and was awarded a contract in 2013 and went online in 2016. We're very proud of Comanche, and it has ushered in the recent begin of shuttering of units 1 and 2 at Comanche. Another 100 megawatt project in Minnesota that we developed. This is an interesting project in Virginia, a very different layout, as you can kind of see, where the projects have to be spread out. And this is in part to dealing with the various stakeholders associated with these projects, maintaining environmental sensitivities and various controls surrounding permitting and so forth. Another project in Virginia, these are both 100 megawatt projects. We recently announced a 70 megawatt deal with the city of Philadelphia, which is where our headquarters is located. These are projects that are allowing cities across the country to basically represent all of their utility and electrical power generation consumption from solar projects. A very growing trend across the country. Ownership and operation, CE Community Energy has a successful track record of financing projects, both large and small. We own and operate about 12 megawatts. So most of our projects are kind of pure development plays where we develop the project and then ultimately transact them to a long-term owner and operator. But we do own about 12 megawatts across the US. Nearly half of those are in Colorado, and 2 megawatts are in San Luis Valley. In addition to those, as a part of those 2 megawatts, we've also built and put into place about 8 megawatts in the San Luis Valley around Antonito, Alamosa, and Monte Vista. We've also looked at numerous projects across the San Luis Valley, utilizing some of Chris's wonderful mapping and overlays. Solar is these are solar gardens that we also do in addition to our large scale projects. These are distributed projects. Again, as Christine kind of referenced, all of the projects that we put into the Valley have been to date distributed community solar gardens. And basically they provide access to solar energy at a cost-effective fashion for the community surrounding. To expand on that, there's some key differences between solar gardens and utility scale projects. The utility scale projects enter into a long-term contract with a utility. And essentially the power that's produced is funded through that long-term contract, and we can then take that contract and utilize it to provide long-term financing for the solar project. On a solar garden project, it involves multiple contracts with various participants. Both the utility needs to be involved as well as the individual subscribers, and those individuals can be homeowners as well as businesses and/or municipalities or schools. In the Valley, we worked with Energy Outreach Colorado, and I heard Representative Valdez, talk about the heat and so forth, and utilities there in the Valley. Energy Outreach Colorado has long worked with kind of economically disadvantaged individuals to help them through the Excel LEAP programs that provide both low cost and compensated gas and utilities to make sure they are heated and cooled during the winter and summer months. We used Energy Outreach to provide a large number of low-income customers in the area to become subscribers. And as a part of that program, nearly 300 customers are now receiving nearly free electricity. Unfortunately, even with becoming a subscriber within the Community Solar Garden program, you still have to pay a certain amount of fees that Xcel needs to maintain and control its lines and so forth. This is actually a picture of our Antonito Solar Garden, which is located loosely at the southeast corner of the town of Antonito. As a part of that project, the town is a subscriber. The county, Cañas County, is a subscriber, and this is actually placed on land that is owned by the town of Antonito. Interestingly enough, Andrea helped a great deal with this project. We like to work with local representatives as much as we possibly can, and it is important to get that involvement. It is important to kind of spread around the love, if you would, of getting others involved, and having that local outreach is, invaluable. Stakeholders is a conversation that I thought is very important. It kind of extends off of what Chris described. I don't know that she used that word, but we view stakeholders as a critical component to our site selections, and stakeholders can be the water pivots, the electrical grid, the environmental impacts, the landowners themselves, the permitting authorities, and particularly as it relates to Solar Garden, the subscribers. All of those people play a big role into where best to locate these projects and where best to permit them. Interconnectability, as I've kind of got described on the screen there, is a critical component as we look to site these locations. Obviously, of those who are on the phone that live in the valley, sun is a very prevalent component of the valley, and pretty much every square inch of the valley could be a perfect location for a solar project. Unfortunately, very few of those locations are in a spot that is easily or viable for interconnection into the grid. Think about the overlay that Chris described with the substations and the transmission lines. You have to be in close proximity to those locations. Some of those areas that I think Joe may talk about in a little bit that were designated as the solar energy zones, were challenged when it comes to interconnectability. So within that context, almost all of our locations were placed on private landowners, and we worked closely with those landowners. We had to work closely with irrigation companies as impacts to irrigation ditches and those rights remain very critical to the things that we do. Every one of our projects, whether it's needed or not, goes through cultural and environmental studies to determine if there are any areas of local importance. We take great pride in doing those, even when they're not required by the permitting agency, which is actually very frequent, that we can do these things without those requirements. Anytime that we do encounter issues, we work hand in hand with those local authorities to mitigate any issues and hopefully to avoid them altogether. Project mitigation and avoidance is a key component to what we do, because we want to incorporate our projects as sensitively as we possibly can into the community, as they are going to be present for 20 plus and sometimes even 30 plus years. We want to have a long standing of being a good neighbor. Some of the things that we are now working on to continue this good neighbor aspect, which we're kind of labeling, our green gold standard, is we're looking highly at pollinator type approaches. Everybody is kind of aware that bee pollination has become a critical component to agriculture, and we're seeing across the country and the world greatly diminished bee populations, and so we've incorporated this wherever we possibly can. It's a whole lot easier to incorporate in areas where it rains than it is in Colorado, but planting specific species that are of great interest to the pollinator species. And we actually generate pollen and bee honey in a number of our sites. And we loosely call that solar honey, and send that around to some of our customers and so forth. It's a very good product. We also look at sheep grazing. We initially just started a sheep grazing pilot on a project in North Carolina. Again, these are components trying to develop both dual uses, multi-uses projects with the solar gardens and solar projects. So, very, very important to us to look at ways that we can maximize the impact or minimize the impact and maximize the use on our projects. That's the quick and dirty presentation that I put together. Again, we value our relationships that we developed in the Valley, and looking forward to doing more projects in the Valley. The Valley is somewhat constrained with its ability to export power, but with the help of some of the locals there, maybe we can improve those situations transmission-wise in the coming years. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Sam. I appreciate that overview. For our final panelist today, we have Joe Vieira. Joe is a natural resources and geospatial science specialist, having worked the last half of his career for the U.S. Department of Interior, Bureau of Land Management. Joe functions as a DOI BLM project manager and public land use planner in Southern Colorado. Since 2002, Joe employs and manages basic and applied biological, physical, ecological, archaeological, social, and geographic sciences, and federal public lands environmental law, and in public lands planning, analysis, and decision-making. During this period that we're talking about, the solar energy designation process through Programmatic National Environmental Policy Act, Joe has led and managed multiple public land use planning projects and interdisciplinary teams in Colorado, California, Nevada, and New Mexico, including the cross-agency effort between the BLM, the U.S. Forest Service, the Browns Canyon National Monument Management Plan, and solar, wind, and geothermal energy land use plan for the Department of Interior's Bureau of Land Management. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Andrea, and it's an honor to be on a panel here with Chris Canaly and Sam Sowers and Representative Valdez. I joined this HECHO webinar from the San Luis Valley beneath the Sangre Cristo Mountains that from my BLM work, I know and understand is sacred to indigenous people since time immemorial. That's relevant to thinking about solar energy zones. And I'm pleased to join this discussion facilitated by HECHO in an auspicious moment of change. For the last 4 years, I've been fortunate to think about and plan for the Browns Canyon National Monument as part of our nation's national conservation lands. But for a 6-year period from 2010 to 2016, I had the privilege of working as a member of a Department of Interior Bureau of Land Management, Colorado Renewable Energy Team with solar, wind, and geothermal project work responsibilities in Colorado, California, and Nevada. During that period, we were engaged in the development of the Department of Interior BLM Solar Energy Program, including conducting baseline science and regional mitigation plans for 4 Colorado solar energy zones covering approximately 16,000 acres in the San Luis Valley. The solar energy zones were designated and allocated for priority solar energy permitting. During that period, I was also involved with planning new solar energy zones in Imperial County, California, and Clark County, Nevada. The BLM Solar Energy Program, including solar energy programs on public land, are prescribed and provided for under federal public lands environmental and energy law as passed by the US Congress. Indeed, all renewable energy program activities on your public land, including the development of solar, wind, and geothermal, are prescribed under similar laws and policies. Specifically, the Federal Lands Policy Management Act of 1978 and other laws that set the multiple use sustained yield mandate, the criteria for natural resources management, and the conservation requirements that govern the use and protection of your public lands. The Federal Lands Policy Management Act also requires federal agencies to periodically develop and update comprehensive land and resource management plans to respond to new science or societal concerns and needs, such as responding to climate change. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 and various executive orders under the Obama administration directed public lands agencies such as the BLM to make lands available for renewable energy generation, diversifying national energy generation, expanding renewable energy resources, considering environmental and public health impacts of energy and societal need to respond to greenhouse gas emissions as a driver of climate change were reasons for developing BLM solar energy zones and the broader program. Essentially, our BLM renewable energy program duties from 2010 to 2016 were to inform decisions if, where, and how solar energy, a relatively new type of public land use, would be permitted on the public land over a 20-year period. To do that, the Department of the Interior, BLM, including our Colorado Renewable Energy team, worked closely with environmental science specialists at the Argonne National Laboratories, all of us charged with science, public engagement, public process, analysis, and development of this new BLM solar energy program. BLM completed the solar energy zone planning work under the National Environmental Policy Act that requires federal, state, local government coordination on all major federal actions, such as allocating lands as solar energy zones. The NEPA also requires tribal consultation, public involvement, and the interdisciplinary incorporation of environmental science to make sure we consider the public interest, including effects on land, air, water, wildlife, historical and archaeological, community and tribal values, and their protection. The FLPMA and NEPA require informed land use plan decisions and or permitting of solar energy development on public lands. It was through the NEPA public process that we engaged communities, local communities in the San Luis Valley, solar energy developers, utilities, environmental organizations such as the San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council, Conejos Clean Water, the Wilderness Society, Defenders of Wildlife, the Nature Conservancy, among many others, to understand local concerns, values, and priorities to the allocation of the public lands for solar energy zones. Because the public land also provides vital ecosystem services, such as wildlife habitat, flyways for birds, soil stabilization, water flow, recreation, and contain priceless archaeological resources, it is important that FLPMA and NEPA were applied with great care in Colorado. 2 of the proposed solar energy zones occur within the Sangre de Cristo National Heritage Area, which was once the Conejos Guadalupe land grant, and are one adjacent to the new national monument in New Mexico, the Rio Grande del Norte. We undertook advanced ethnographic studies with tribes and Hispanic communities. We worked with Adams State University. Take pride and consider that democratic NEPA process and the engagement that we undertook critical to the public in Colorado, but also in other Western states. The BLM Solar Energy Program and Renewable Energy Program in general responds to the nation's need to expand energy generation from low greenhouse gas emitting energy sources and to respond to societal changes inherent under the climate change. Under the Solar Energy Program, as Chris stated, BLM designated 19 priority solar energy development areas or solar energy zones in 6 southwestern states, including Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah. We're environmentally responsible and community responsive utility scale solar energy development on BLM administered lands would be prioritized and facilitated. The BLM Solar Energy Program defined utility scale solar energy zones projects as those with capacities of 20 megawatts or greater that generate electricity delivered to the transmission grid. Through the Solar Programmatic EIS Record of Decision, the BLM established a comprehensive solar energy program allowing permitting of future solar energy projects on public lands to proceed in a more efficient, standardized, and environmentally responsible manner. As part of the solar energy program, the BLM categorized lands that are excluded from utility scale solar development in those 6 Western states. And that included approximately 79 million acres for such regions as steep slopes, areas of critical environmental concern, wilderness study areas, among other resource concerns. But BLM also has identified these specific solar energy zone locations that are considered well suited for utility scale production of solar energy, and represented different levels of environmental impact. And these would be areas where BLM proposed to prioritize development. That was on approximately 285,000 acres in the 6 Western states. The program emphasizes and incentivizes solar development within the solar energy zones and outlines a collaborative process for identifying additional solar energy zones where we weren't thinking or new information came forward. Under the right-of-way regulations at 43 CFR 2800, the solar energy zones are designated leasing areas, and solar energy development on these lands will be facilitated through the offer of competitive right-of-way leases. The solar energy program also included programmatic design features, namely project facility guidance within the solar energy zones to help us avoid, minimize, and mitigate adverse environmental impacts. The program also allows for utility scale solar energy development in variance areas outside of the solar energy zones in accordance with the established variance process, which are environmental screenings to help us where other areas we didn't define. Between 2014 and 2016, BLM completed regional mitigation plans to consider strategic compensatory offsets from unavoidable adverse environmental impacts of solar energy project development, and to help us strategically benefit conservation. It has been 8 years now since the initiation of the BLM Solar Energy Program. Based on input from tribes, BLM Colorado conducted deallocation of one of our 4 solar energy zones to protect sacred values for people whose interests in the San Luis Valley precede our current energy needs to time immemorial. These 2,900 acres are no longer available based on continuing improvement of our knowledge, but 13,000 of these acres still are available. Numerous solar energy projects have been permitted on solar energy zones and on variance lands in California, Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. New solar energy projects in those states are underway right now, as well as in New Mexico. Here in Colorado and in the San Luis Valley, the benefits of superior solar energy transmission capacity is the widely recognized constraint on solar energy development, either on private land or the BLM solar energy zones. As a BLM and U.S. Forest Service public lands planner and analyst of environmental science with years engaged in the land use planning for solar energy, I understand public questions of private versus public land development. In the San Luis Valley, there exists sound ecological and socioeconomic reasoning why solar development has occurred on private land primarily. With that said, it must be stated that the need for solar generated electrons on our transmission grid to sustain our vast energy demand and a solution to our even more momentous climate change crisis has never been greater. I'd like to thank HECHO, Andrea Guajardo, and all on the panel and those for beginning this discussion again and a chance to think about it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe, and everyone else for that overview of the planning that goes into utility scale solar development on our public lands, what goes into regional planning for permitting and executing utility scale projects, as well as some focus on distributed generation. At this time, we're going to go into the Q&A session of the panel. And let me see if there are any questions from the attendees, please feel free to put them in the chat box. And if they're not, we'll go into some of our prepared questions for the panelists. So a first question, I think, to sort of frame the discussion for everyone that's attending is just, and any of you could answer this, but exactly how much acreage does a megawatt of PV take up, like in terms of space, so people could sort of understand the geospatial constraints we're talking about here when we're talking about 20 megawatts of solar development. What is like an acreage or something that people could visualize?
Sure, and I might be suited to answer that question. What we generally look at is between 7 to 8 acres per megawatt AC. And it's important to kind of make the distinction between DC and AC. Solar is produced in a DC basis, converts to AC, and that usually involves a kind of a step down. Using the example of Comanche Solar, that's 120 megawatts AC, but 156 megawatts DC. That covers a little over 800 acres for that project.
Excellent, thank you, Sam. So in considering that space that we're taking up with the solar energy zone designation on our public lands, can one of you, maybe Joe's best situated to answer this, but if we built out the utility scale on the public lands designated across these states, what is the generation capacity? What is the upper limit that we could be exporting across our grid?
You know, I didn't do that. I didn't run that calculation for you before I came, but so we estimated about 10 acres of impact. What Sam referenced was a little bit less, but if 285,000 acres divided by 10, help me with my math. That's 28,500 megawatts, I think is my simple man's mathematics on that. Sam and Mike, you guys are better suited to help us understand technological change and efficiencies in energy and what we might expect over the 20 years, in the next 20 years in terms of what could be produced off of any individual acre.
Well, I'll just jump in real quick and say, if your math is right, that's roughly 30 gigawatts. Colorado's peak capacity, when we need all the energy that we need, which only happens a couple times a year, is 15 gigawatts. So, you know, I don't suspect anybody's suggesting we would blanket every available acre in the San Luis Valley, but clearly you have enough capacity there to meet 2 times our current need. Now, if we electrify buildings, which I know a lot of folks want to do, we electrify our transportation, which is huge on the governor's list. You know, we expect that 15 gigawatts to increase significantly. I think the key important thing here is that although you could produce nearly 30 gigawatts of power in the valley, you can't get even a fraction of that out of the valley due to transmission constraints. And so, you know, I know Sam has done the development in the valley and he can speak more closely to that, but there is clearly enough opportunity, at least on paper, to power the entire state. In fact, you could probably power both Colorado and New Mexico, because New Mexico has a smaller load than we do. But you can't, as of right now, you can't get that energy out of the valley, and so it's not especially, you know, so that's the bottleneck. So, but that's
Thank you, Mike.
There's mind if I say,
go ahead,
hey,
Joe.
Andrea, do you mind if I just clarify? I want to make sure that
Yeah.
285,000 acres is across the 6 western states. So
yes, it's across 6 western states, and not just the San Luis Valley's acreage is much smaller.
I apologize.
So Mike's answer is to the 6 southwestern state region. That's what we could be exporting if those were built out. And again, Colorado was a small player in the 6 state region in terms of acreage designated for solar development. And a question came from one of our attendees. Do we know what percentage of the total SEZ space is currently being used to generate solar? I know that, Joe, you mentioned sites that have had applications and have actually had build out. Do you know what percentage of that is used for solar right now?
Really good questions, and I apologize to the attendees that I'm not coming with my statistics really sharp. It's only a fraction, but what I will say is only a fraction of our current solar energy zones in the 6 western states have applications or development projects on that. That's not to mean it's marginal. The widest number of applications are in Southern California in the BLM's California Desert District, in San Bernardino County, Imperial County. but there's some pretty significant development on the Dry Lake Solar Energy Zone in Clark County, Nevada. I'm just not going to be able to tell you what percentage of those solar energy zones have been built out. I would also like to say that some of our solar energy program projects that have been permitted within the Bureau of Land Management in the 6 Western states are on these variance lands and outside of our solar energy zones.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So shifting a bit to the planning itself, I think it's an interesting time as we're transitioning to an administration that wants to focus more on a green economy and renewable energy generation and what that means on our public lands. This effort is a huge planning effort that I would consider very successful. So if anyone wants to talk about just the importance of planning as we're discussing development, utility scale solar development, how important is that in your processes, whether you're planning in communities, whether you're engaging the stakeholders like the agencies are, or you're engaging the stakeholders like private industry is, how important is that front end load for you to actually develop projects?
I'll jump in first, maybe there. Apologize, Representative. I'll let you speak, but planning is critical. And back to the statements made by myself and Chris, looking at stakeholders and overlaying the community aspects in the projects, and particularly as it relates to interconnectability, are all huge aspects that we do early on in the process. Unfortunately, not every project works. And so we quickly go from location to location to location to find the right spot. Unfortunately, it's not like a retail, 7-Eleven corner that given population, you can use that corner no matter what type of thing. You have to look at all the components involved, and that takes critical planning up front.
And Sam, this is Representative Donald Valdez, and thank you for saying planning, because that's where it all starts. Looking at our infrastructure, the needs, the feasibility, getting that last mile, but also our distribution and transmission lines. And I think where it all comes down in that planning is an energy audit. What are our demands and what are the needs to continue to make sure that we have sustainable energy, not only for residential, for commercial, for industrial, for agricultural use, but also today, tomorrow, and the future. As we look at it, I'm an individual that I use energy every single day. I'll flip on a light. I need to charge my phone. The technology world right now is everyday use, and the next generation, they're using probably twice as much energy, electric energy, that we are using today. So if we can balance with renewable energy moving forward, and also looking at our current use of energy, natural gas, to make sure that we have a sustainable energy moving forward for the future. And in the San Luis Valley, yes, we have some of the best solar arrays in the world, but we need that transmission line, not only infrastructure in the San Luis Valley, but to get that energy outside. And if we look at other states, surrounding states, it's all connecting the dots with Tri-State, with Excel, with going solar for residential. This morning, I was talking with a couple of journeymen who are working on connecting a new development facility there in La Jara, my hometown. And they're saying, it all comes with connection. Safety is one of the things, but also looking at our natural resources and how important the demand is for energy today. So with that, you're right, Sam, starting with the plan and making sure we have the feasibility moving forward in all areas.
I might bridge off of that a little bit, if you don't mind. That was wonderful input there, Representative. The planning, the one critical aspect of planning, particularly as it relates to transmission, is time. And as we sit and look like we're going to see an administration, as Andrea put it, that is more supportive of these process, we need to try to utilize this runway that maybe we have to try to get some things done. We hope from an industry that the next administration will put a high value on transmission. and to the effect that we can start to make national investments to access some of these areas. I mean, I read something yesterday that there's one thing on the books right now that might suggest up to 25 gigawatts on federal lands by 25 by 25, which was a new number that I recently heard. That's very exciting. In order to do that, takes some serious transmission planning. It takes some serious supports from the community, and it really takes, unfortunately, it will take some sort of cooperation and accommodation from the community to where, hey, I've always looked at this wonderful field, for decades and for generations, and in order to access these energy zones on federal lands or even private lands, to bring some of the great solar out of the valley, I need to now embrace that there's got to be a new transmission line through there.
And Sam, with that, we need to look at manufacturing solar panels and renewable resources to create jobs here in rural America and rural Colorado, and keep those jobs here and growing, not only in our communities too.
So I'm hearing you all are saying that planning is of utmost importance. Is there some consensus amongst our panelists there? We have a question.
Do you mind
Go
if
ahead,
I would like to say something? I've over the last 4 years, I've been fortunate to host colleagues working in environment and renewable energy from former Soviet Union countries in Central Asia. And what I'd like to stress the value of planning is that what is unique in the United States is our public process and public engagement. It's not common in other countries that when major actions are underway that we involve the people, and we involve the people in thinking about where we are and what we're going to do. And that's one point I would like to make that is important in planning, is that engagement. Also, I'd like to say that planning takes time. And I think Sam stated that very well. We have vital resources, and there are trade-offs when we think about energy and energy development on public land or private land. And so that early compilation of information to help us in the planning really does help expedite the permitting decisions and the way we would permit solar energy on either private or public land.
Thank you, Joe, for that further.
And if you don't
Go ahead,
mind,
Chris.
Andrea, yeah, just from an organizer's perspective, it's so much easier to engage people in crisis management than it is in planning. And it's part of the human condition. And, as a farmer said to me, it's for some reason, we never seem to have time to do it right the first time, but we sure seem to find the time to do it right the second time. And what we need to realize is planning actually saves time. It's upfront time, but eventually you end up with an idea and a structure in place that everyone is pretty much agreed to. And planning is a form of policy. And once everyone is kind of, is supporting it, then things move so much easier, and you don't end up dealing with the resistance that happens later. And it's so interesting. I dealt with oil and gas development on public lands for about a decade, and we dealt with 6 different oil and gas plays. And the level of emotion and confrontation was so extreme. And I think about that compared to the solar development process, which was really so positive, and there was so much buy-in, and it's a much healthier process, honestly. And I just want to say that on the ground, how important it is for people to get involved with their planning commissions, with planning just generally.
Thank you, Chris. So we do have one final question from our attendee list. And I do want to make clear that this programmatic effort was a huge planning effort across 6 states that should essentially expedite the time in a site-specific application for utility scale solar developers, that they don't have as rigorous of a review coming up in terms of NEPA. It would be an environmental assessment instead of an environmental impact statement. So I think the BLM and its agencies were very responsive to the multiple stakeholders in that process, including communities, conservation organizations, and industry. And I heard that the transmission constraint was one in Colorado, but not necessarily across all the zones. So another person active in that process is asking the final question today, and it's specifically for Joe. In addition to the environmental and community benefits from planning ahead and designating SEZs, can you speak a bit more about the benefits to developers for building in the BLM solar zone as opposed to outside them on public lands? For example, I know that BLM permitted the projects in the Dry Lake SEZ in Nevada in half the average time, and BLM also provides some financial incentives for projects in SEZs. Any other thoughts you want to share on that, Joe?
I think the participant is pointing to an important point that BLM was trying to do, Department of Interior, was to facilitate and streamline permitting of solar energy projects in these areas. There's been an extraordinary amount of baseline science conducted to help in that process and to shorten the environmental review and decision-making that would occur after that area. And the participant is correct that the BLM conducted environmental review at an environmental assessment level, which is a reduced amount of time and reduced amount of hard costs for the developer on those solar energy zones. So that was the idea of the solar energy zones at the very beginning, was to facilitate permitting, more rapid permitting, and reduce some of those costs of environmental review as it relates to solar energy zone development, solar energy development on public land. It would be a lot higher costs outside of the solar energy zones because we wouldn't have the level of baseline science completed to inform our permitting decisions.
Thanks everyone so much. Amy, our communications coordinator, said we did have one more question and I'm not seeing it. Let me see, it was from Mallory.
Yeah, I can go.
Oh, yeah.
Amy, can you ask it? Because I'm not seeing it, please.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks, Mallory, for sending it in. So Mallory asks, in your experience, what is the biggest challenge or barrier when it comes to siting additional transmission? Do you think the planning process is working well, or are there changes that are needed to make it easier to site transmission while still being responsive to community feedback, especially in areas of particular cultural significance? And Mallory, I'm not sure who that was directed to, so if you could let us know in the chat, that would be helpful.
This is Representative Donald Valdez, and I just want to say, I think the biggest, one of the biggest blocks is cost. Building that last mile of infrastructure, whether it be for transmission, but also an easement moving forward, whether it be overhead or underground. A lot of times overhead is easier to work on to build it, but also if there's a need to mend it and maintenance with the transmission. So with that cost and easement and putting that, going back to what Sam said, is putting that plan in place, but it takes time. And as everybody from Joe to Christine and Sam says, it takes community involvement, getting that discussion out there, putting that plan in place and moving forward with that initial plan. And I would say all those connections, all those variables need to take place moving forward for any transmission infrastructure.
So one thing, thank you, Representative Valdez. The one thing I might add to that is a couple of examples. I mean, within Colorado, there is a long planned transmission line called the High Plains Express. It's been kind of in the planning process for the last 20 years. And its intent was to bring kind of wind energy at the time from the east and bring it to areas of both Colorado, Wyoming, southern Nebraska, and Utah, and even Oklahoma. Try to send some of those power areas in, spread it out. And the cost of that, as Representative Valdez indicated, is massive. And we also have to be kind of careful how we do those, because it's possible that you build this.
I think Sam locked up. Is he locked up for everyone else or just for me?
I think we
Okay.
need to work on broadband also with this.
Yeah, broadband is obviously another area we need to plan in. Let me
Yes.
just interject and say I'd like to offer that this planning effort be utilized as a roadmap in other areas. It was highly successful from a community perspective, from an organizer perspective, to look back on how many people were engaged in this process with no litigation at the end. So I think that's a good indicator of acceptance by multiple stakeholders. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd like to offer this specific programmatic process as a roadmap for planning. You scale that out or up, however we do that. But yes, we did lose Sam, and we're getting close to our time, so I'm going to pass it back to Bianca. Representative Valdez had one more thing, and then we'll pass it back to Bianca, please.
Andrea, as we talk about energy, broadband is the service that we need to look at also in connecting individuals and people in rural America, but also people, because it's a service needed to continue to communicate, and it's a service that needed to connect people together. So I would love to have another panel talking about broadband as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks for that plug.
You
Okay,
know, if I
Bianca.
could-
Okay,
I'm
Chris.
sorry.
One more thing, Chris, and then pass it back to Bianca.
I'm
please.
sorry, just really quickly, you know, our rural electric co-op is actually doing broadband simultaneously with,
Yes, we are.
you know, it's with the power grid. And it makes sense for, you know, smart grid to be able to have interactive technology with our energy grid. And, you know, there's so much happening right now with storage, with, you know, capability that we're just beginning to understand right now. And it's only going to get more sophisticated. And so, you know, there's just a huge learning curve with technology that's also pretty exciting in terms of what's going to happen even over the next decade.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly wrap up this event. So thank you to all of our speakers today for the great conversation, and a special thank you to Representative Valdez for the work that you do to serve your communities and the work that you do with HECHO as well. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. We hope you are leaving this event with a few key takeaways about on how a transition to renewables on public lands are key to climate mitigation and community resilience. So we hope that you will keep up with HECHO's work by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at HECHO Online. You can join our digital advocacy network to get updates on the issues most important to HECHO's work. This is HECHO's last event of the year, and we can't wait to see you all in the new year. The HECHO staff wishes you a great rest of your 2020, and thanks for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas.
Bye-bye.